What's up, guys? Welcome back to Inside Out Precision. Been a little while, but I wanted to give myself a chance to really play with some of these bows this year before just dropping a review with basic information. If you've watched these reviews in the past, you know that I do try to keep things unbiased. But with how good of a bow everybody is building right now, it's hard not to try to get more information than just the specs. So while we're going to do the normal specs of the bow and speed test and all that, what I really want to go into is a little bit more of like the engineering of this bow and what it will actually do for you. So like I said, I wanted to shoot these for a little while. We had a left-handed one in here. We had to sell it, but I did get a chance to shoot it for a while, and I shot the Phase 4 last year, so I'm hoping that I can give you guys kind of an idea of the comparison between the two, at least in my experience. So jumping into the technical side of things, again, this is the Mathews Lift 33. So 33 inches axle to axle, has an IBO speed rating of 343. So they jumped 9 feet a second from last year. How accurate that is, there's still quite a bit of debate about that. There's a whole debacle with were they testing that at the ATA rating or IBO rating. Either way, there is a speed increase. I shot this bow next to my Phase 4 in the exact same specs, and I picked up about 6 feet a second. Like I said, we'll get into those speed ratings later. Has a brace height of 6.5 inches, which sounds a little bit short, but we'll get into that in a minute. Even though it's a short brace height, it's still a very, very forgiving bow. It goes from 27 to 31.5 inches in draw length. And with a couple things they did differently this year in the switch weight mod is you can now go down to a 55-pound peak weight mod as well as up to an 80, whereas before it was 60 to 75. I think they just had so many people out there just saying, why don't you make an 80? Why don't you have an 80? They finally caved and did that. One thing I can tell you about this bow is that it is literally an entirely new bow. So one thing that Mathews gets criticized for a lot is, oh, you guys just built, the same bow and just called it something different and charged me $100 more. Well, I can tell you, literally from top to bottom, they had to retool their entire manufacturing facility. Everything from the riser to the limb pockets, to the limbs, to the cams, to the mods, everything is new on this. One feature that I really liked is they lightened this thing up a full half pound. So last year they were about 4.7, 4.75 realistically. This year they're coming in at like 4.3 realistically. So they're able to take a full half pound out of that riser, still maintain a ton of rigidity, might even actually be stiffer than last year, and make it almost as smooth and quiet as last year. Now, in my opinion, it is not quite as smooth. And when I say that, I mean, it's really hard to tell, but there's just a tiny, tiny little bit more shock, but that's due to that increased speed and this different cam design here. So before we get into everything else, I want to talk about the riser design of this bow. So if you've watched some other reviews like Podium Archer, MFJJ, he always measures the reflex on a bow, which is a really important thing in terms of forgiveness. That ties directly into the brace height of the bow. So people always say longer brace height bow is more forgiving, which is true. And they always think it's because that arrow is getting off that string sooner. The arrow, it's not traveling as far before it leaves the string, but it actually has nothing to do with that. What it has to do with is the design or the shape of the riser. So I've explained this on other videos, but the amount of reflex is the distance from the pivot point of the limb pocket here, straight across to the opposite side. The distance from that to the center of the grip is the reflex. Last year, the Phase 4 had about 2 to 2.25 inches of reflex. This bow has like an basically 1.3 inches. So it has an inch less of reflex, but still has a 7.5 or 6.5 inch brace height. So they hardly even changed the brace height. And the reason for that is because these limbs are so short that even though that riser is basically as straight as almost like a target bow riser, they can still maintain that short brace height and keep that speed up. So you literally have the speed of a hunting bow with the forgiveness and feel of a target bow. I will say this bow aims even better than my Phase 4. I shot that Phase 4 better than almost any bow I've ever shot. I think between the Traverse and that Phase 4, it's a real tie, honestly. But back to that riser design. So what less reflex does is it gives you more leeway if you do put any torque into that riser. So for example, if let's say I put 2 pounds of pressure on the left edge of a grip on a bow that has 3 inches of reflex. At 20 yards, my miss will be greater than a bow that has like an inch or an inch and a half of reflex like this bow with the exact same amount of grip pressure. That's why you're never gonna see a recurve bow with a reflexed riser, because there's so much pressure holding a recurve in your front hand that if there's any reflex to that riser, it's just gonna torque like crazy and have no consistency. So again, kind of a marvel of engineering that Mathews did here, where this bow has a longer riser than my Title 39 Mathews target bow. So, I mean, this thing literally aims and feels like a target bow in your hand, but is throwing arrows out there at 300 feet a second. So really, really impressive with that. One thing I also noticed is that they seem to have changed. So in their new mods, they're more true to draw length. So in the past, Mathews has almost always drawn or felt a ½ inch longer than other bows in that same draw length. This year, like I shot a 30 in a Mathews and a 30 and a half or 30 and a quarter and everything else. This year, I would have to shoot a 30 and a half in this. I feel scrunched at 30. So they're more true to spec in that regard. In terms of the feel of the cam, so lots of people go, oh, it draws stiffer, and look how radical that cam design is. And I would say it stacks a little bit harder at the front than the Phase 4 did, but honestly, if I should go back and forth side by side, I think my Phase 4 might draw a touch smoother. But after you shoot this 4 or 5 times, I don't even notice it anymore. If I shoot 4 or 5 arrows back to back, I don't feel like I'm struggling at all to get this bow back. There's no big hump right before it goes over the wall. I think it's a smooth drawing bow. Now, one thing that I found peculiar about that is that it seems like in different draw lengths, and I mean, this is obvious, but in different draw lengths, that draw weight seems to stack in a little bit different place. So depending on your draw length, whether you're shooting the 33 or the 29 and a half, you may have a different experience of somebody that has a draw length who's 2 inches shorter or longer than you in that draw cycle. So again, I encourage you to go shoot one to see for yourself, but it is definitely not a harsh draw length. Some of the other features of this bow, so obviously you still have the bridge lock sight here, the bridge lock stabilizer, you got your rear stabilizer mounting hole. The axle system on this is awesome. So they actually mounted it, instead of going through the limb this year, the axle, you still have the top hat system to shim it and everything, but it's actually mounted on top of the limb. And what Mathews is saying that does is it gives the limb the most amount of like effective surface area, essentially. So you're maximizing the efficiency of that limb while shooting. From a technician standpoint, one thing that I like is that the top hats go in and out so much smoother. Some of those Phase 4s, because that rubber goes through the limb, some of those things you had to like put an Allen wrench up against it and like pound those things out, then your limb starts slipping in the press. And with this, it is just buttery smooth. It's quick, it's easy. True to Mathews form, they tune like a dream. Extremely, extremely well thought out bow. So let's talk about speeds here for a sec. So I usually shoot on camera. Just with time and everything tonight, I shot this previously, so I have the speeds written down here. So I shot a 525 grain arrow, a 450 grain arrow, well, 448, but 450 grain arrow, and a 382 grain arrow. So at 30 inches, 70 pounds, and I made sure it was 70.1 pounds, so right at 70, 30 inch draw. The 525 went 272. The 448 went 301. And then the 385 went 318. Now, with my hunting arrow, which was a 468 grain arrow, my Phase 4 shot that at 292. This bow, that was at the 75 pound mods. This bow with the 75 pound mods at that same arrow was 298. So almost 300 feet a second with a 470 grain arrow at 30 inches. So that's really efficient speeds. At 28 inches, 525 grain arrow was 264 feet a second, which that shows me that this is an efficient cam system with heavy arrows, because usually at 2 inches of draw, you're going to lose about 20 feet a second. We didn't even lose a full 10. We lost 8 feet a second. The 448 was 278, and then the 385 was 296 feet a second. I want to build an arrow that it is a true 350 grains to see if it will hit IBO. I don't think it will. From everything I've seen, most guys are, you know, even when everything is in spec at the IBO or ATA specs, which is apparently there's a debate out there now about that, but 70 pounds, 30 inches, 350 grain arrow. Most people, the most I've seen is like 336, 338 feet a second. But still, I mean, speed is so overrated these days. It's nice to have a fast bow. You don't want a slow bow. But I mean, anything, if you're at 270 and above in anything, like you're going to get plenty of distance out of your sight. You're going to have good speed. You're going to have good penetration. So when people start freaking out about 6 feet a second, it's like, if you shoot two arrows that are 6 feet a second apart, you can hardly hear the difference when they hit the target. I mean, it's like, boom. I mean, it's, so some people freak out about that. Like, oh, they're bumping up their speeds, blah, blah, blah. Here's the thing. If you took off the string dampeners and you took off the peep sight and you took off the, you know, the speed buttons and everything, all that stuff weighs down the string. And I'm pretty sure when they do these speed tests, it's right at, you know, it's like off the assembly line, put a D-loop on it and shoot it. Now, I wish that we would come up with a more relevant speed rating. Like if they did, you know, 29 inches, 70 pounds with 420 grain arrow or 440 grain arrow. I think that would be a much more realistic rating for bows, but apparently, you know, IBO doesn't want to listen to anybody. So I've been really impressed with this bow. So like I said, I was shooting it. I set the left-handed one up. I shot it. It was, compared to my Phase 4, we literally only had this bow for like a day. Compared to the Phase 4, at 20 yards, like I would purposely torque that a little bit, and I had damn near the exact same sight on. You know, it was the same distance from the bow. It was a black gold instead of an Excel, but everything was almost straight across identical. I felt like on the bad shots, this bow was, I wouldn't say significantly more forgiving, but it was more forgiving. You know, it might have been a 2 or 2.5 inch miss with the Phase 4, it was like an inch or an inch and a half miss with this at 20 yards. So you extrapolate that out to, you know, 40, 50, or 60, you could be talking, you know, a 6 to 8 inch difference in point of impact on my horizontal misses. It's just a comfortable bow. Now I've been shooting Mathews for a while, so I'm used to that feel. So when they improve upon it, I like it even more. That being said, I did just get my RX-8 Ultra today that I'm going to set up and shoot this year. I may, you know, I'm shooting the Mathews title for target, although I've hardly been shooting at all for target stuff. I may buy one of these lifts as well and just shoot them both and, you know, pick a winner and then sell the other one. But it was such a toss-up to me between those two bows. I've never owned a carbon bow before. And anyway, that review will be coming soon. I'm going to do a bow build and everything, but I really encourage you guys to go shoot these. I know you probably have a lot of information on this already. But I think what they did engineering wise is pretty impressive. To the untrained eye, it just looks like another Mathews. But to be able to take a full half pound out of the riser and still maintain that smooth shot and quiet bow, and then get the speed that they get with the forgiveness that they have is like, I mean, they knocked it out of the park with this one. I say this every year, but I'm like, where do they go from here? If I had to guess, you're going to see kind of the same theme where, you know, next year it's going to be more or less the same platform, maybe slightly different riser length or axle to axle length, you know, a little tweak here, a little tweak there, but I think they're going to run with this for a while. If you are in the market for one, I know they are hard to get. All orders now are not going out until June. I think we're down to, gosh, like 3 29.5s and I think 6 33s right now. And that's just because I ordered less of the 29.5s. But I mean, these things have been, you know, flying off the shelf every day. So if you know a shop that has one and you're even thinking about getting one, I would get down there and shoot it and put some money down on it and have them hold it for you, because these are not easy to get. So anyway, I hope this video gives you a little more insight into the engineering and the technology of this. Like I said, it's a tough bow not to love. I appreciate you guys for watching. If you hit that subscribe button, it really, really helps us out. Until next time, remember, precision is a decision. Keep them in the middle. I'll see you on the range.